It's all about you.
Yeah.
You're not ever, that would require empathy.
Yeah.
To think, oh, geez, I've just insulted Chris Matthews. That I don't feel good about that.
Michael Moore's scorching takedown of Donald Trump after his controversial second-term victory over Kamala Harris was not just another instance of a filmmaker weighing in on politics. It was a full-scale cultural and political intervention, one that carried with it the intensity of years of pent-up frustration from millions who had watched Trump survive scandals, defy predictions, and march back into the White House. Moore had always been a figure who relished exposing power structures, but this time his fury seemed sharper, more personal, and more relentless. His attack drew directly from Trump's chaotic first few months of the new term, which many critics viewed as an extension of his earlier presidency, only this time with even fewer guardrails. The allegations of secret affairs, which Moore highlighted with dramatic flair, pushed the narrative into even murkier territory, layering personal betrayal on top of political turmoil. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The timing of Moore's intervention amplified its impact. Trump's second term was still in its infancy, yet already the administration was floundering under a cloud of poor decision-making, embarrassing public gaffes, and a combative stance toward institutions that might restrain him. The sense of déjà vu was unmistakable. For many Americans, it was as though the country had leapt back into the whirlwind of chaos that defined his first term, only now with greater polarization and even higher stakes. Against that backdrop, Moore's critique landed like a thunderclap, crystallizing what many already feared, that the damage from Trump's renewed presidency would be profound and lasting. Moore's style has always been theatrical, blending outrage with storytelling, and in this case, he channeled that energy into portraying Trump as not only politically reckless, but also morally compromised. By focusing on the alleged secret affairs behind Melania's back, Moore framed Trump's behavior as emblematic of a deeper pattern, a man who viewed loyalty as expendable, who blurred the lines between personal vice and public responsibility. The implication was not simply that Trump's personal life was scandalous, but that the same disregard for commitments extended into his governance, where he treated the Constitution, norms, and alliances with the same cavalier attitude. This framing was not subtle, and that was the point. Moore wanted to cut through the noise and brand Trump's early months back in office as a grotesque spectacle of power misused. For Trump's opponents, Moore's tirade became a rallying cry. It provided language, imagery, and urgency at a time when despair and exhaustion were widespread. The filmmaker's narrative didn't just dwell on Trump's flaws, it painted them as unavoidable realities that America would now have to face head-on with no illusions left. This kind of rhetoric has always been Moore's forte, taking a sprawling political mess and boiling it down into a story of corruption, betrayal, and hypocrisy. It was cinematic in scope, designed to not only inform but to move, provoke, and ignite. But the implications of such an attack stretched far beyond partisan politics. Moore's framing of Trump's second-term blunders suggested that the very foundations of trust in leadership were eroding. When a president could be accused of so many affairs, of betraying his spouse while also betraying the public trust, the symbolism became impossible to ignore. It raised uncomfortable questions. If fidelity and honesty could not be expected in private, how could they be expected in matters of state? Moore leveraged this overlap, making the personal political in a way that pierced through to an audience that might otherwise tune out policy debates. The scandal wasn't just tabloid fodder. It became a metaphor for everything that was unraveling in Washington. As the weeks passed, the fallout from Trump's early moves in office, contentious executive orders, volatile international posturing, and domestic policies criticized as cruel or short-sighted, was being cataloged daily in headlines. Moore's intervention, however, turned those scattered grievances into a coherent indictment. He portrayed the administration as a house of cards, sustained only by bluster and denial. The personal scandals woven into the larger political narrative underscored a sense of rot that critics argued had always been there, only now impossible to hide. Trump's resilience in weathering attacks in the past made this moment even more electrifying, because Moore was effectively daring the public to believe that this time would be different, that the weight of accumulated scandals would finally matter. The cultural implications of Moore's broadside were equally significant. In an era where media ecosystems were fractured and audiences retreated into their echo chambers, his voice cut across divides in a way few others could. His long career as a populist documentarian lent him credibility among working-class viewers, who might otherwise dismiss liberal critiques as elitist. By anchoring his takedown in themes of betrayal, secrecy, and broken trust, he connected to universal anxieties that transcended party lines. It wasn't just about Trump's policies, it was about the kind of man he was and what that said about the nation tolerating him once again in its highest office. Trump's defenders, of course, dismissed Moore's claims as politically motivated, part of a broader campaign to delegitimize the president. Yet even in rebuttals, the sheer ferocity of Moore's critique forced a reckoning. When the debate turned toward whether the president was hiding affairs or lying to his wife, it opened up broader discussions about honesty, morality, and the standards expected from a leader. These were not just partisan talking points, they struck at the core of what it means to entrust someone with the immense power of the presidency. And in that sense, Moore's attack achieved what perhaps no single scandal had been able to. It made the abstract concerns about democracy and governance feel immediate, intimate, and visceral. The implications for Trump's relationship with Melania were particularly potent. Whether the allegations were fully substantiated or not, Moore's decision to center them underscored a public fascination with the first couple's dynamic. For years, observers had speculated about the distance between them, the coldness in certain public appearances, and the strain of Trump's well-documented past indiscretions. Now, with new claims of secret affairs surfacing, that speculation flared up once again, magnified by Moore's framing. It cast Melania not only as a victim of betrayal, but also as a symbol of the broader compromises and humiliations that the country itself endured under Trump's leadership. The parallel was impossible to miss. Just as she endured his unfaithfulness, the nation endured his recklessness. In amplifying these scandals, Moore forced a conversation not just about Trump, but about America's tolerance for such behavior in its leaders. How much betrayal was too much? How many affairs? How many lies? How many chaotic decisions could be brushed off before the breaking point was reached? These questions hovered over the discourse like an ominous shadow. The danger Moore implied was not just in Trump's actions, but in the normalization of them. If the public could shrug off even this level of misconduct, what limits remained? The implications for democratic culture were dire, as cynicism threatened to calcify into acceptance. At the same time, Moore's fierce rhetoric carried risks. By focusing so heavily on personal scandal, he risked accusations of sensationalism. Yet even that risk seemed part of the strategy. In an environment where Trump thrived on spectacle, Moore countered with spectacle of his own, turning outrage into a tool as sharp as satire or data. He knew that the story of secret affairs would stick in people's minds far longer than discussions of budget proposals or judicial appointments. It was an act of narrative jujitsu, using Trump's own tabloid-style vulnerabilities against him. The broader implications for political discourse were equally profound. Moore's intervention demonstrated the growing power of cultural figures to shape political debate outside traditional channels. Where once critiques of presidents might have come primarily from rival politicians, think tanks, or journalists, now they were just as likely to come from filmmakers, comedians, or musicians. This blurring of lines between culture and politics had been underway for decades. But in the Trump era, it became a defining feature of the landscape. Moore's attack was not just political commentary. It was performance, media event, and moral judgment rolled into one. It showed that in a fragmented media age, power could be contested not just in legislatures or courts, but in the realm of narrative itself. As Moore's words circulated, the sense of disillusionment deepened for those who had hoped Trump's second term might bring stability. Instead, his presidency seemed to be repeating the same chaotic patterns, only now with fewer excuses. He had already been president once, had already faced scandals, and had already been warned of the dangers of unchecked impulses. To see him fall into the same traps again underscored the idea that this was not a matter of inexperience, but of character. And it was this idea, that Trump's flaws were not incidental but essential, that Moore hammered home. If the president's personal betrayals mirrored his political betrayals, then there was little hope of redemption. The implications stretched outward into America's international standing as well. Moore's attack highlighted how Trump's early moves were unsettling allies and emboldening adversaries, making the U.S. appear unpredictable and unreliable. The personal scandals only reinforced that image, portraying a leader whose lack of discipline in private was mirrored by a lack of discipline in statecraft. In global politics, perception is power, and Moore's framing suggested that Trump's personal life was not merely gossip, but a window into the instability he projected on the world stage. What made Moore's critique particularly explosive was the way it condensed years of criticism into a single, searing narrative. It was not just about one scandal or one misstep, but about the pattern, the accumulation, the sense that nothing had been learned and nothing would change. This was the true implication, that the country was locked in a cycle, doomed to repeat the same mistakes unless something fundamental shifted. Moore's attack was less a prediction of consequences than a warning. A flare shot into the night sky to signal the dangers ahead. For all the fury and spectacle, the deeper resonance of Moore's takedown was its ability to tap into a raw emotional truth. That betrayal, whether personal or political, leaves scars. Americans who felt deceived by Trump's promises, who watched institutions bend under his weight, who saw values they cherished dismissed as irrelevant, all of them could see themselves reflected in Moore's framing of Melania's plight. The secret affairs, real or alleged, became shorthand for a larger betrayal, one that touched every corner of the Republic. And in that sense, Moore's destruction of Trump was not just about a man or a presidency, it was about a nation confronting the cost of its choices, and the uneasy realization that the damage was still unfolding. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Michael Moore destroying Trump after winning against Kamala? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.